That's nice. And that's not what he had in mind when he wrote that song. Lay in the hot sun and roll a big fat one, but here I am doing this kind of work. But it's for a reason. It's for a reason. Gotta get this girl underway. Ow! Shit. And the tank is oriented under that bench, and on that end there is, excuse me, and on this end, under the cushions, there's that hand pull station, which this boat is pretty good for, and there's the other end of the hose. And you can see the small hose is the vent hose. So, having seen that, the big hose goes down under that space here, which is under the main bunk, down by the bilge, so it goes down, down, down in elevation. Then it finally comes up and heads to the fill port, which was right there, which I've abandoned. I'm going to move the fill port to this side, and it's going to come up from down here, pass through the gaps, and I'm going to put the new fill port up there. That is the new plan. I got the wind vane fabric replaced this week, and so that's pretty good, and I got a lot of the projects worked inside the boat. So I guess the thing on my mind today is, well, I just had a birthday. Cumpleaños. And yeah, so when I have a birthday, it is an opportunity for reflection a little bit. And I guess I sit back and I ask the question, is this sailing adventure going as I had intended? That's really the question of the day. You know, I bought this boat over 3 years ago. It's 3.5 years now I've had this boat, and I am still more or less in the same goddamn place I was when I bought it. I mean, I'm in Guatemala, which I hadn't been to before, and I'm getting around and I'm doing stuff, and I'm getting hours on the boat and a lot of miles under the keel for a guy who doesn't seem to go anywhere. But I'm getting a sense of urgency that I want to get moving. A friend of mine from the old power plant days just went into hospice care, you know, because he had cancer, has cancer, and when you go into hospice, of course, we all know what that means. And it just kind of has me a little fired up, like, you know, damn it, I am just not going to sit here anymore, continually trying to make improvements on the boat and trying to prepare and prepare and prepare. I think it's time to just go. I've done this. I'm heading, you know, preparing now for my fourth haul out. Four haul outs in 3 years is too much. For one thing, it's expensive to do haul outs, so it costs too much money to do haul out work. And I thought they've all been necessary to get important work done, and I guess that might still be true. But in general, I would say we're gonna finish this baby up. I mean, I've decided that for me, the training phase, it's over. Okay, we're not going to be in a training phase anymore, and I am going to state right here that I am not seeking perfection. If you went to, you know, I don't know, maybe the Royal Yachting Association, you can probably go to their website and look up, you know, a list of what's all the equipment needed before you go offshore. And you could probably go to Boat US, you could probably go to many other websites, you know, where these so-called experts, and some are indeed experts, but they'll give you their recommendations on stuff you should buy before you ever consider going offshore. But I think it'll cost me $10,000–$15,000 by the time I get all the stuff needed, and I just don't think I want to do that. Because I mean, I guess I'm taking my step back, and I'm just thinking, you know, let's just stop and think, okay? Phoenicians went across the damn Mediterranean beyond Gibraltar possibly 3,000 years ago. We know the ancient Polynesians and Marshall Islanders used to cross thousands of miles using only memorized songs and poems in their minds and using stick charts. I mean, stick charts like this one here. And you think about the people who've escaped distressed countries like Cuba or the African countries and are trying to make their way to the UK, or the Cubans trying to make their way to the USA. In some cases, in a truck, lashed to a bunch of 55-gallon drums and things that aren't even boats. And I'm thinking, let's try to find some middle ground between. So the theory being, if you're waiting for perfection, you will never leave the dock. That's on one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum is the people who say, dude, we got to go, because if we don't, we're going to get killed. So they jump in whatever boat they can find, whatever vehicle they can make by hand, and cross 90 miles of water perhaps to get to the Florida Keys. So I'm trying to get in the middle. I'm trying to just do what's sensible. And that's exactly why I'm here, trying to finish up the sensible things that I really ought to do before I go. And then I'm just going to go. So in this episode, we'll talk about some of the passage planning that I'm doing and how I look at making a passage. And I really need to step back and think of the lessons learned, because I've done my passage planning in the past and still gotten myself in trouble. So we're going to take a look at that. Okay. Yeah, in the Central Pacific, someplace I've always wanted to go was Bora Bora. That's been, when I was just a boy, I saw a picture of Bora Bora taken from the air and how beautiful it looked, and I thought about myself sailing in there and, doing the bula bula with all these topless girls wearing grass skirts, and I thought, man, that's the way to live. And I was transfixed by the stories of Tales of the South Pacific, and I know that if I do go, that it won't be as I imagine. I'm aware of that. Commercialization has gotten everywhere in the world, and I'm not looking for some utopia. But I am not content to just stay another year in the Caribbean. So we're going to get out of here and head for Panama, and then do the canal and then cross. So planning the trip. Well, in order to plan a trip, you kind of have to know where you want to go. And I would say South Pacific. That's where Russ always wanted to go. I always wanted to disappear to the South Pacific, and, disappear from the commercial world and just get away from it all. And I think a lot of people have that escape. For some people, it might be a mountain, a cabin up in the mountains, or a house on a lake, just disappearing for a while. And that's where I'm at, okay? But the problem is, if I want to go to the South Pacific, that's fine, but you'll see that our current location is the Atlantic. Now, my location is right here. When you're planning a trip, there's a couple of resources you should always take a quick look at a minimum. And one of them is Jimmy Cornell's book. And I've mentioned this before. It's called World Cruising Routes. And he has a number of routes that he has kind of pre-planned for us to get you from all points south, starting from the Bahamas or eastern Florida. And I'm down here, so I could get on this route and look at his notes of what he has. And he does have notes for them, but it's not really anything that would change your life. He has the best time, December to May, tropical storms, June to November. Well, that's kind of duh. We knew that. And I guess the only thing you really need to know is that the prevailing wind is always going to be out of the east. Certainly once you're south of this line, the Greater Antilles, the wind is almost always going to be out of the east unless something funky is going on. Further north of that, kind of sort of, winds out of the east, usually up to about this latitude, and that changes winter and summer. So once you read that and you digest that much, then there's really not much else to say. You can go to pilot charts, which I'm going to show you in a moment. And pilot charts will say the same thing. Okay. So now let's take a look at the North Honduran coast. Okay. So the thing you need to know is, well, what direction is the water moving? Right here, right here, right here. What direction would we expect the water to move? Well, there's a pilot chart for that. And the pilot chart shows that we expect to get some kind of favorable current that kind of runs counterclockwise in this little bay, and we should get easterly moving water at only about half a knot, going along the north coast of Honduras. And then we expect that to change when we get down here past Honduras and ready to make our turn south. We'll be looking at the normal Caribbean current, I would think. You also have to look at wind roses, and the wind roses for this area here, it will tell you what you're getting, and look at it. It is like 90% of the time the winds are going to be out of the east or the northeast. And that's the real trouble here. How do you escape this area? And I'm going to include everywhere in range of my pencil. How do you escape that if the winds are always coming out of the east? Well, you have to take advantage of low pressure systems passing through the USA in the winter time. After a cold front has passed, and a cold front is basically a low pressure system. The winds are counterclockwise around a low pressure system. So when the front passes, the low pressure system is generally like up here in Georgia, and after the front passes, the wind will come ripping out of the north, sometimes for 2 or 3 days, and sometimes, depending exactly where that low pressure system is, if it's far enough south, those northerly winds will extend this far south. In fact, they'll go as far south as Panama, and they'll last sometimes for 2 to 3 days. Yeah, so the basic strategy is to have yourself in a position to take advantage of the north winds. Some people will take normal conditions, check out of Guatemala, go up and they'll get to Punta Gorda or Plasencia in Belize, check into that country and kind of sit tight and wait for the cold front to blow through and you get your winds. But at that point you'll be behind the reef, and so you need to have pre-planned how you're going to get through that reef, and it might be at night. Or some people will go and sit tight here at Tres Puntas, Cabo Tres Puntas, and just sit tight waiting. You clear out, you sit here and you wait, and after the front has passed and the north wind start, you motor around that head, and then boom, you go. And you can go, and you could be aiming for the Bay Islands, Utila, Roatan, and you could stop there and wait for the next cold front and then go again. Or if you think you're going to get 4 days of north winds, you could just try to go all the way through. So there's one thing I should point out, is that going on this route, around Honduras and going straight to Panama, and I would go to Bocas del Toro, that's not the only direct option. You can do other things. Let's go back to the rusty trusty chart. If the objective is to get to about here, because when you get here far enough east, then you can almost always rely upon really good easterly winds from the little northeast, a little southeast, but it would be perfect to get you right down into Panama once you make it to this area. But that doesn't mean I have to make a straight run, straight out, and then turn right. I can stop and linger at the Bay Islands. There's Utila, there's Roatan and Guanaja. Some people take another route, and they just ride the northerlies as far east as they can get, and when the winds clock to the east, then they turn north, and they go north some, and then when they get another cold front, they'll go east again, and they'll work their way to either the Caymans or Jamaica or the south coast of Cuba. And once you get here, then you are far enough east that you can go straight south to Panama anytime you like. And that would be the easiest sail in the world. 2 days, maybe 3 to go straight south from here. Maybe 4, I don't know. A third option is, and I have considered this, is to retrace my steps. And it kind of hurts me to think that, but we could run north along this coast, get into that Yucatan current, and go ripping up north just like this track shows, and come down into the Gulf Stream, run past the Keys, stop if you want to in Marathon, head for Fort Pierce probably, and get up to the mid part of Florida, and then ride the cold fronts out of here and go east. And then you're you can head all the way to the eastern Caribbean like St. Thomas and Anguilla, or you can go through the Bahamas, and you can come through the Windward Passage, and you exit here. And I'm sure you could talk to 100 guys and girls who've done this 100,000 times, and they can all give you their opinions, and I don't know. But the key is to do the right things on the boat and to make the boat ready. And I'm going to end the video in just a moment, but we're going to review, I think, I'll call it a wish list of things that I could buy if I had unlimited funding. Or I could include things that people have suggested I buy. And I think that's a discussion that probably merits its own video someday, because you get it all the time. I mean, and I've told you before, like there's these old fat bald white guys who are parading around marinas in, say, St. Petersburg. I got that a lot when I first bought this boat. And the first thing they would say is, you gotta have this, like electronic auto helm. You need to have a radar, you need to have this, you need to have that, you need an EPIRB. I don't have an EPIRB. I have a personal locator EPIRB, but not one for the boat. So what I'm gonna do at the end of this video is total up the cost. Because if I need a life raft, and I need an EPIRB, and I need a radar, and I need all these other things, at some point something's got to be chosen and something is not going to get chosen if you have limited funding. And I think that's where I'm at. I mean, I can't even tell you what the correct answer is, and I can't even tell you that I'm going to choose a correct answer, because I think it's all subject to the individual's feelings. I mean, we've all traveled slightly different paths in life, and we're all different individuals. So I'll make the best decisions I can for me. That's all I can promise you. But that's not a stressor. I'm feeling pretty good, and today I'm going to do some work. I'm going to go back in that engine compartment and do something, to the base plate for those two overboard valves. I am not going to try to remove those two seacogs, because to remove them would be a destructive job. I would kill them. And then it kind of forces your hand, and now you can't send any cockpit drains out in the bottom of the boat. So I want to keep the valves, and I want to keep them working. But I just want to kind of stop that rot somehow, some way. And I have a brainchild, so we'll work on that today until it gets too damn hot. But with that, guys, I sure appreciate you watching, and I do look forward to your feedback and your insights and all your comments. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.